Okay, so I've just had a listen back through this because it's been a while since I've mixed it, and I'll just go straight through it. So the way we're going to go straight through it is to look at the channels first, and then to look at the bus effects that I've implemented and the mastering. So if we go through, first of all, what I've done for this is and this is the case for pretty much all of my mixes, I've done sub-mixing to break the song apart into its more important parts, or where there are more than two mics on one instrument. I've sub-mixed that down, which makes it nice and easy to pull just the kick drum up or down or something like that, for example. So if we jump into the kick drum processing, I've got just very basic setup here, which is standard 1176 compressor. You can see the settings there, and 1073 emulation, which is mainly boosting top end and click for the inside kick. That's what I wanted. I've also got the high pass filter. I've put that in at 80, so I really am looking for a tight sound from the inside kick. Really, Siri? Okay, right. So then the next thing is kick out. I'm still high passing this, but it's at 40. It's much lower. I'm trying to keep the whole kick sound tight as a whole, really, but it's yeah, you always need a little bit of low pass, and then a little bit of mid taken out. That's standard, really. Added a sub kick in. It just sounded good, really. It felt necessary. I'm wanting to get more low end out of this one, and so I've got the mix a little bit of the way up. Then 76 compressor again. Okay, so and then finally I've made a massive mid. I didn't realise that was the case. Okay, and then cut it to 50 this time. Right. So then the snare, you can see on the pan, I've taken it a little to the side just to even it out, get it into the centre. Let's go. I did do some triggering on this as well. So chain's slightly more complex on this. White 1176, DBX 160, my favourite colour compressor. That comes before the Pultec emulation, which is doing exactly what you'd expect. That's the Pultec trick, just boosting lower mids, and it's quite and followed by a high pass. It's quite an aggressive curve, and that's perfect for snare as far as I'm concerned. That's gives it more body basically, and then I've done it again. Probably, if I wasn't working in the flow of the moment, I probably wouldn't have done this on there. I would have done it on the Pultec instead, but it sounded good at the time. This one's simple. There we go. Just boosting highs on the snare bottom, and kind of mixing it in as like another part of the snare top. Obviously, you do mix. Part of the reason you mix the snare bottom in at all is because you want the more the slight articulations in the ghost notes to come through, and it's there for that, but also I've introduced it as a part of the snare sound, but I've also driven it slightly, which is worth pointing out. Snare bottom, again, same kind of thing as the snare top in terms of what I was trying to do, just that and I was a little bit playing around with EQ there, a few resonant frequencies I didn't like. The only reason this is really here is because I wanted some doubling of the snare top, because I had quite a lot of hi-hat spill in this session. So yeah, that's really the only reason. Otherwise I would have been more than happy with the tone of the snare sound itself. And then for the actual thing, well, now I decide I don't like it. I don't like the lower mid. And more compression, just to really get the thwack out of it, because that's what DBX 160s do. And it looks like I've got my it looks like I've got a little bit of very short reverb that's almost gated there. So it actually appears that I have... no, I don't. This proves how long I've been since I've looked at this mix. That's in following mixes, that's been done on a bus, the snare reverb, but it works just as well there because it's only the snare that's using it, but I like to bus it so I can do other things to it. Okay, then toms. Toms have no processing on the whole all of them. I had to, for some reason, the rec tom died during mid session and stopped. Well, I mean that gain's been boosted by 26 decibels, so I had to get the trigger out just to deal with that. Okay, so that's standard, just really high passing. Then Fairchild emulation compressor. Like these, they're kind of, I don't know, they kind of slam and they're dirty and stuff. So that's why I use these. And then lots of lots of boosting in the 1073, mainly high end, just for that content, and a little bit of low end as well. See if I can eke out some more resonance out of the toms. Same thing on here, but I've actually been able to use the audio file because the mic didn't die, so I've just gated it, and that's pretty much the same processing, although a much bigger mid cut on the floor tom. Probably wasn't tuned as well as the sample had been. Just try and take all the tune out of it, and similar boosting and cutting. Okay, there we go. So overheads, I'll go through these first. I didn't process them together. In future mixes I have processed them together. I should mention that the toms panned hard left and right. That's a cheeky trick I learnt from Jamie in college, one of fellow classmates, and it's just fun really, just kind of cute, like the sound of it, and it gets them out of the way, and it makes it makes the fills seem more cool when they're going into the next bar, especially if you're listening on headphones as well, I should mention. So these have the same processing on them, so I'll just go through one of them for you. A little resonant frequency I didn't like, and high pass. LA2A compressor, chose this because rather than the 1176 for this bit, because I wanted I wanted a longer kind of release that this provides. This is an emulation of the optical LA2A compressor, which has quite a unique release pattern, and so that's why I've used this. Then again, this is the Fairchild emulation, kind of dirty slamming compressor. Quite like it. The science behind these, as you feed more signal into them, they compress more. So in terms of the ratio actually goes up as you send more signal into them. That's the trick with these. So that's part of the reason I think why it's so cool. And then just adding a little bit more top end. I think I kind of, obviously everything that you record is slightly dark, and then you get to make it all brighter in the final mix. That's the way I've worked it. Okay, and then this is just a sidechain really. It's not doing anything. It's just I just reducing the overheads to the kick by a little bit, and so that's cool. I enjoy that. Right, and then room. Oops, what did I do that? Room. Yeah, I've just taken the brightness out of it and taken all the low end out of it, because what I do with these is I distort the hell out of them. That is the reason for having the room in there is to give it some more edge and stuff, and also 1176 compressor, and then the room is also being sidechained to the kick as well, partly because I like the kick to be clean and tight, and the room and overheads obviously have different kick sounds, so if I duck them out I get more of the kick sound that I want. Guitars, okay, so here's the bit of the professional liar part of the job, because these were added in by me afterwards. Not like I've got very much of them in there. I'm only using them for the top end, but it just helps to. I'm just going through Guitar Rig basic setup. I'm just doing that to when the choruses come in, it really brightens up the guitars, widens them. That's what you want, really. Okay, so literally nothing, no processing on these. They must have been fine at the time. And then just a little bit of a group. There's there's nothing individual about these sounds that I didn't like, which I did a good job in the recording session. And just a little bit of low mid cut and some bit of resonance there. This just because that's where the bass is sitting most of the time, and the snare, things like that. So I like to keep that free of guitars, and yeah, making them a lot brighter. Making them brighter. I thought about this. It's kind of simulating the effect of distortion, really, because it's bringing up the harmonics, which is what distortion does. Except that you still get the note clarity in there when you're bringing up top ends. So that's a nice trick, really, is if you're recording clean. Not clean. If you're recording electric guitars, you can record them with slightly less gainy than you'd like, and then up the top end, and it gives them the same effect, but it makes it slightly more audible and more clear as a tone. And then with these, sidechain into the kick again. So that's a common thing. That's a standard rock procedure, really. As I like to sidechain to the kick. Pretty much everything I can, unless it's a lead instrument. Right, so then this solo part, I already got the tone I wanted, and I didn't really want any particular reverb on this, so I decided that I'd go for. It's quite a high cut. It's quite a high low cut, but equally all the soloing, the notes end here. It's not like he's playing low notes, so I don't need any of this. All that is low muffled noise from him hitting the strings with his fingers, really, and a little presence boost and a gradual cut. I probably felt that this was slightly too bright, but I still wanted it to cut through, and so I've kind of done an aggressive Pultec style curve that just does that, really. Okay, right, let's move on. Joe's guitar. I had trouble with this. I couldn't get it to stick out at first. So Luke showed me the best way to deal with this. Panning it to the side, that's a nice trick, because obviously the guitars are already wherever they're at, and the central position is really held by kick, snare, stuff like that. So just panning it off to the side is kind of nice, and it doesn't really affect the stereo positioning too much in terms of the overall master. Okay, so a lot of stuff. This is just a direct signal, but it puts it through a speaker emulation and a mic emulation, which is nice. Then, okay, some little resonant frequencies I didn't like, and maybe I felt it was slightly too bright and pingy. So that's this general EQ curve helps with that, and also cleans up the bass end. I don't really want that there with the acoustic. Not with the acoustic, with the clean guitar. Doesn't really make sense. Okay, and that's cell channel. I've got the compression on, and not really any EQ. No, just the compression, really. Cell compression. I felt that fitted better with the clean guitar. Little with chorus. I say little bit. It doesn't look like a little bit because it's at 75%, but that's how this chorus plugin works. And just enough to kind of make it not as transient heavy, because obviously you're affecting the phase with chorus. So it's for that purpose really, and also just giving it its own kind of signature tone, because really I was dealing here with a guitarist who didn't have their own tone, and I've kind of had to make it for them. So most of Joe's parts that you will see have some kind of processing on there where I've taken a creative element of the production. Right, finally, compressing to the kick again. Joe's vocals, right? Okay, oh no, I'll go for bass first actually, because I should go through the instruments first. Bass, I've split into two parts. The low part, that's very simple. This is recorded through a DI, and that's probably a slightly unnecessary boost there, but I'm mainly looking for this area. I'm looking to make it fairly tight. I don't want any of the rumble really, and I've split the bass up into two parts, so the crossover's around here. So that's that basically. I am looking for lower mid from this part of the bass. That's how I like the bass to sit there above the kick and kind of have those aggressive low mid frequencies. LA76 compressor on all, so the 1176, yeah, and that's just to absolutely flatten the hell out of it. And then compressing against the kick yet again. The second part of this is slightly more complex. I have very heavy drive on this part of the bass. It's really nasty and gnarly, which is what I wanted, sending that through into a guitar amp. Just a basic Logic one, it works well for this purpose, although later in the mixes I've probably gone over to the Waves amps more often than not. They're better quality, I find, and have more options in terms of speakers, stuff like that, and mic emulations. And then another smoothing out process with the 1176, and just a few resonant frequencies created by the distortion that I wasn't happy with. And obviously you can see the crossover there. I've actually got quite a large crossover bit there, but that's cool. And then just the overall EQ, another little resonant frequency that I found I didn't like. And I'd experimented with these little bits here, just seeing what I could boost, but didn't. They kind of stood the bass out too much in the mix, so I ended up having this flat as possible. Okay, right. So backing vocals. This one's really simple. I didn't want to overprocess these because I didn't want them to stand out in the same way that Joe's vocals did. A little bit of top end cut, a trick I learned from Morgan last year when he was mixing a Marvin. He was like doing the mix task, and it was a Marvin Gaye record he was doing, and he cut the top end off the vocals, and it sounded perfect. So I thought I'd try that. Seemed to work. And a little compression, just on 4 ratio. So generally I don't compress. Generally I don't try to reduce any more than like 3 decibels when I'm compressing, unless I'm doing something with transients. So for backing vocals, yeah, I'm trying to aim for around 3 dBs of reduction on average. Okay, vocals. This is really standard. Just a de-esser. Didn't have the 76 on. Vocal rider, because obviously not all vocalists are very good at being even, and even if they are, you still want this on anyway. Makes the compression work much better, because it's basically a compressor without any artifacts. So that's cool. Then LA2A, kind of classic vocal compressor really. Doing what I want it to. It's got a slow attack time, so the syllables are not syllables. The plosives are being brought out, and any of the starts of words. I mean, the first syllables are always being brought out. And then 73, more top end boosting. That's really what I use the 1073 for. And any kind of subtractive EQing or anything I need to be more accurate, I go straight to the Pro Q. Presence boost, kind of more body in it I wanted, and then I didn't need any low end obviously. Okay, so on to bus processing. Right, so what we're doing here, we've got a vocal reverb. I actually put a chorus on the reverb send. That's a trick I started doing I don't always do it. I just like the idea of it on here. Some spice to the reverb, if you know what I mean. RC48 is my favourite. Reverb for vocals generally. So that's doing. It's actually quite a short. No, it's not. It's a fairly short reverb, really. I think in future mixes I've gone for longer reverbs. Okay, next one, vocal delay. I try to take. This is interesting. Taking all of the attack out of the delay. It's very interesting, actually. Almost makes it sound more like a reverb. And then the Valhalla frequency echo. This is a really cool one. It's not. I think I don't really have that many cool delay plugins. Usually I just go straight for Logic's, but the Valhalla stuff is really nice. And this does kind of more dub stuff usually. But I must have. It's kind of a slapbacky thing I'm doing here, which it works just as well for. Okay, next thing. SSL compressor as parallel compression for the drums. Nice, lots of colour, 4 ratio. Probably compressing this by quite a lot, and I'm compressing this by quite a lot, and then mixing it in gradually, just to get more oomph out of the sounds. The instrument reverb, I've gone to Space Designer for. This is a small reverb really. It's just to get some room sound really, because the rooms at college are quite dry. And then the sub bus. So I added this because I'd actually made the mix really tight and low, and it didn't have a lot of low end at all, which I think is quite nice, to be honest. I think it's quite a good way to work it, because I don't want to be over mixing the bass. So then what I did was I sent the bass and the kick drum to this, put the mix on full, amount nearly on full, low pass down to like 80 hertz, I think. Oh no, 60 hertz. Okay, right. And that just meant that I had this low end that I could reintroduce back in, and I just compressed that because I want that to be nice and smooth, that low end with LA2A. So it's got that release pattern that keeps it compressing the whole time, and mix that in very lightly. Okay, so the final thing, I bust absolutely everything to music except the vocals, which are then compressed against everything else. Just helps the vocals sit nicely. And finally, master. This one's fairly simple. I felt like I might have mixed it a little bit dark, maybe with too much body around here, so I just evened that out. Little filter there, just to make sure no low frequencies get through from the sub kick, and then we go into this stuff. So I'm looking for, this is the tiniest bit of compression. This might be like 0.2 of reduction, ratio of 1.5. Like, we're talking nothing here. Just evening it out gradually, but without trying to not get any, not get too much like kind of pumping with things against each other. This was only for the bass end. I compressed it again. And so that's just to even it out more. I kind of really wanted this to kind of sit well, so that's how I was doing it. And then this is what I go into at the end. I was quite happy with this. Boost into the limiter and get in between 2 to 4 dB of reduction, and then it just flattens it out nicely, and you can see it sits there. It goes a very fat sausage. So that is in essence that's the whole of the mixing process for me. Okay, well there you go. Thank you very much for listening. Let's get this off.